Okay, so let's do a little experiment. We're 5 episodes into this series, and now that both Alex and I are a little more aware of the analysis community and how everything works, I feel that a little shaking up of the formula is needed. While I'm not going to say that I'm getting bored of this, I sure hope not, since whenever I sit down to write this, I practically finish the thing in a day. I think that 5 episodes is enough to where you can start questioning your material. Right now, I believe that it's one of those times.
So here's the deal. For the time being, we're just going to cut down on episode explanation that essentially serves no purpose. We initially thought that it would be helpful to lay the groundwork for what we essentially talk about via the play-by-play of the episode, but we eventually realized that we can just explain or say what we're going to cover beforehand. There are a few reasons why we're doing this. Like Vicodin said, this is an experiment. An empty explanation of the episode is just kind of wasted words when we don't have anything to say about it. That'd be like if you're going through a museum and the guide tells you, "This is the apes exhibit," and reads off the history that you can see in the pamphlet that they gave you.
We're still going to discuss the episode chronologically, since doing otherwise would ruin the flow of the video, but for all intents and purposes, we will assume that you've seen the episode. That way, time that isn't spent providing empty narration could instead be used on what exactly we bring to the table. I severely doubt that you watch us for our soothing voices. Along with that, if we omit anything about the episode, let's just assume that we didn't have a problem with it. Without further ado, let's discuss the opener.
Maybe it's just us, but the first few seconds of the opener felt kind of like in media res. Usually the episodes start off with their soft little jingle, or wait a few seconds of an environment shot before we get right into the episode. I can just imagine the few people tripping over their couches with snacks because they think that they have that extra 10 seconds, but they end up losing precious rarity dialogue. Also, is it us, or are the CMC's voices changing a little bit? Sweetie Belle still has her adorable squeak, which is at least 19% of her appeal, but I hope the show goes somewhere with that in the future.
We've already seen a lot of nods towards the Cutie Mark Crusader coming-of-age narrative that we mentioned in our Some Pony to Watch Over Me video, so we're going to remain optimistic and hope that it's going to be touched upon in Season 5, or the final season if we're lucky. It's definitely a powerful episode that could be done along the same manner as Flight to the Finish. Insofar as anything else we could think of with the opener, it's surprisingly good, but granted, it's written by Dave Polsky, so we weren't exactly holding our breath just yet.
Once Act 1 comes around, that's when we notice things start to get a little messy. We can understand Sweetie Belle's forgetfulness on the dresses, although it is kind of contrived, since unless Sweetie Belle was doing all the stuff that she said she was doing while completely removed from Rarity, then how would the dresses slip her mind? Especially when she had this much time in advance. Along with that, Polsky really seems to be portraying Sweetie Belle as a little more singular and unlikable than she has to be. Sweetie Belle considers the play to be her moment to shine, whereas the other CMC are playing the we game. Everything is for them and we, while Sweetie Belle just seems to have her eyes on her own prize. Not to mention that while she was probably the best lyricist as shown in Showstoppers, she probably could have freed herself up by having someone else at least help her direct.
And the whole singular Sweetie Belle is fine. I mean, this whole episode is based off of the Charles Dickens story where the character is basically acting the same way. But much in the same manner how some movies and other media have been homages to past works but made them better, I feel Polsky could have done the same by shaving off a little bit of this conveyance. I mean, Sweetie Belle isn't really blaming Rarity until she actually gets home and we get that entire scene, but she's basically acting like a kid at this point, which unfortunately throws the episode into your mileage may vary territory insofar as whether or not you can get behind it. Now, to put it simply, your mileage may vary is simply subjectivity. What someone likes will not always apply to what someone else likes. In this fashion, it's risky to portray Sweetie Belle, especially in this show since the fandom is so nitpicky, as ham-handed as this because of a few reasons.
One reason is that if you don't have the balance of Sweetie Belle's actual personality inside of your portrayed characterization, it's going to be called out. Yes, Sweetie Belle is a singer and she's trying to get her cutie mark with this play, but that whole part of her that relies on sticking with her friends and wanting to grow along with them is referenced incorrectly. The play is totally her, not for the benefit of her or her friends, or Mr. Kite. Along with this, that's the narrative that's been portrayed for a while now, and we're fine with it taking a back seat. It didn't Flight to the Finish because it wasn't needed, but it was at least referenced in another way in both the problem being Scootaloo's wings and the simple fact that Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon exist. Blank Blank is practically their way of saying hi.
Another reason why it's so risky is because this episode focuses on Sweetie Belle, you have to be careful to avoid flubbing her characterization because she is inherently a likable character. She could probably kill your family in front of you, but with that one puppy dog face from Sleepless in Ponyville, you'd be like, oh well, I guess I'm an orphan now. She's also the main character, so if the viewer stops caring about the character, all you really have to keep the viewer is the possibility that the viewer can empathize with their problem, or give them no other choice than to be bad, or make their unlikable characteristics understandable. The former choice sort of comes through by the time Sweetie Belle and Rarity are fighting about the dresses, but again, Sweetie Belle is acting like a kid and we have to be reliant that this 5-year-old birthday is as bad as Sweetie Belle says it is. Considering Rarity is the element of generosity, the viewer knows that Rarity wouldn't pull this kind of act, so it kind of turns to the same fashion as games ponies play, where we wait for the main character to realize their mistake. And of course, both were written by Polsky, so we could see the conveyance resemblances.
We enjoyed the crowd and classy scene insofar as visually, especially with how the CMCs prepare to conduct themselves with their modest and classy line. Spike was used well in this scene. He had to be the bearer of bad news, but he didn't trip over himself or have something fall on him in the process. It's kind of annoying how we even have to point this out, the fact that Spike was just kind of there being an unusual thing. Apple Bloom seems a little too close to the mic during her classy line as well. But unfortunately again, while it seems pretty, there are a bunch of nitpicks that came up for Vicodin around the second watch. For example, why would the Cutie Mark Crusaders get a standing ovation if the play was terrible? Yes, the dresses were very good, but unless the entire crowd was transfixed on the dresses throughout the entire play, and plays are usually 90 minutes to 2 hours, then there's no way that Sweetie Belle's play would have gotten an ovation. It's a play, not a dress show. And if that was the case, then the Ponyville crowd, which contains a lot of ponies that we are presuming were the same way and are smarter than that, was just unnecessarily stupid. Also, cheerily, it's hard to call you best pony when you're really loud and annoying with only a few lines.
Once we fast forward to the Rarity and Sweetie Belle fighting scene, Fluttershy jerking her head out of the room while she decides to take that long-awaited break was definitely something that I could see her doing. I've always envisioned Fluttershy as a little passive-aggressive, which is probably what rubbed off of her after putting your hoof down. Sweetie Belle's frown with her lip out was adorable, and I think it looks like a new face model, like Rarity's horror face upon seeing Sweetie Belle's dresses. The entire dress fighting scene flows well, with each line of dialogue not bringing up any awkward alarms. But again, the scene kind of doubles down on the problem that we mentioned earlier, so Sweetie Belle being quote-unquote unlikable could possibly make or break the episode at this point for the viewer. Now, with that said, let's discuss Sweetie Belle's anger and elaborate why we can actually get behind this. Kind of like our little explanation over Spike and Breezy's, Sweetie Belle has a sister that shines more than she currently is. Even though Sweetie Belle is aware that she has some sort of special talent, she goes from completely stressing out over the possibility that her play could be ruined with the absence of the dresses, to happy again since the play isn't ruined, but still suspicious, only to find that the play, which she spent a significant amount of time, effort, and energy on, completely flopped.
This doesn't help when Sweetie Belle, like most people, has trouble admitting her faults, at least in this episode. One of the most important rules that a writer and pretty much any content creator learns over time is that you can't be too attached and defensive about your creation. Considering all the work that Sweetie Belle put into the play was overshadowed by her more important sister, her anger to us is justified. We can definitely agree if this sort of problem identified with you, especially with Vicodin considering he has 7 siblings of varying ages. It's just the conveyance of this is awkward because like we said, we have to rely that the birthday was terrible and we're basically downgrading the mentality of Sweetie Belle to something that's a little harder to get behind. I mean, we aren't going to say that she's acting like a child, because this whole episode just seems like something a teenager would experience as well, but perhaps we could go back to our previous idea about how this episode also probably belongs in the previous season.
However, we aren't going to get behind that completely because Rarity and Sweetie Belle's relationship isn't as ironclad as Applejack and Apple Bloom's. There's definitely tension, jealousy, and frustration within it, especially considering Rarity has a hard time freeing up her schedule for Sweetie Belle. That was one of the issues that was referenced in Sleepless in Ponyville, so the whole "oh, you're so important and cooler that you barely have time for me" mentality could have just clicked within Sweetie Belle and fueled her passionate anger. But yeah, that's what we got for that. Once Act 2 comes around, Alex and I are completely enjoying the first scene. Sweetie Belle's Rarity impression is hilarious to us, and Rarity deciding to wait for Sweetie Belle to cool off is probably the best choice. Once night comes around, we found the "I wish there was a way to take back everything I did" line to be a complete lack of subtlety, which just bugs us. Sweetie Belle sneaks in, opens the box with her magic, which was a neat little nuance, and pulls out the thread to the headpiece.
Can we all agree that it's kind of contrived that Rarity made a headdress that's completely useless once one piece of stitching is pulled out? I mean, I thought that if you're such a savant at the craft, that you would want to perhaps do more than one piece of stitching, since I'm sure you could reinforce the headdress with some additional stitching and still make it fashionable. Our headcanon is that Darth Vader helped her make it. The scene would have probably been a little less contrived if Sweetie Belle just ripped up the headdress or something along those lines. Or don't even show what she does, just show her looking into the box with her evil face, reach her hooves in to sabotage it, and then go to the next scene. Now to be fair, the headdress does look designed in such a way to where every part is enforced with that stitching, but like we said, if Viking and I were dressmakers, we wouldn't stop at one piece of stitching.
Actually, here's a better conveyance choice. Have Rarity put together the headband the usual way, but since Sweetie Belle at least has some sort of knowledge of how sewing works, just show her annihilating all the stitching instead, but still leaving it intact. That way the headdress doesn't look so oddly designed and the point still comes across. The only problem is that with this route, because Sweetie Belle would be a little more passionate with her destroying the headband since it would take more effort, her position of being subjectively unlikable would be heightened. But I'd say that's a small price to pay for eliminating a contrived conveyance choice, especially when Sweetie Belle being this vengeful is kind of what you want to go for. You just don't want to overdo it.
We've seen a small point of contention within Sweetie Belle's dream, considering whether or not the animation team poked a little fun at Leonardo DiCaprio's inability to win an Oscar. Here's what we think. While it's true that the scripts of these episodes are written way far in advance, Pinkie Pride for example was finished way back in late September of 2012, we don't think the same goes for the animation staff. Judging by how numerous episodes jump and change numbers but remain in different production order numbers, we're going to take a wild guess that the animators had enough time to make this intentional joke. Not only that, but hasn't the DiCaprio meme been around for years now? If they weren't parodying the 2014 Oscars, then it was probably the 2013 Oscars, and so on. Plus, that styling looks way too much like Leonardo, even down to eye color.
Nevertheless, we found this poke funny and clever, but as we get back to Luna's intervention, her admittance over Celestia being more important to her was an excellent line that felt more impactful than anything else that Polsky has ever written. I've been waiting ever since Luna eclipsed for that one line, and while it was used in a very flawed episode, it hit that part of my heart that I knew it would. As a fan, it didn't matter about the previous conveyance problems, I got what I wanted. I mean, I wrote a 35,000 word fanfic about this, and the connection of Luna to Sweetie Belle wasn't contrived or out of nowhere. It was perfectly placed. Unfortunately, the problem is that this is Polsky, so the writer within me began to bug me again the moment Luna brought Sweetie Belle back in time to her party.
Before we get into that, we have to give props to the animation team for once again one-upping themselves. The plane that Luna and Sweetie Belle walk upon while they move through her dreams is merely the tip of the iceberg as they continue to impress me with their knowledge of animation. From Sweetie Belle's descent in the dream to the usage of negative colors, which admittedly is probably the click of a button, but still a great choice, the episode flows with life that otherwise wouldn't really feel there due to the awkward writing. Either way, let's go back to the dream.
I don't like these kids, even though they're acting like kids. I also don't like that one of the kids uses Diamond Tiara's voice. Some range would be nice. Although one of the kids kinda looks like Egoraptor with that hairstyle. Sweetie Belle as a toddler is adorable, especially with her messed up lipstick and getup. The predicament that spawns out of the children finding the party favors more interesting than Sweetie Belle was, at least I feel, a better case scenario than her being seen in that smudged up lipstick. Again, the problem that spawns from this flashback I feel is good in theory. After all, traumatizing events in childhood can stick with the child throughout their life, and I would certainly call this sort of embarrassment and unfavorable comparison to her sister to be traumatic.
The only thing is that if this event was as traumatic as Sweetie Belle says it is, and it was certainly conveyed that way, then why did this event come up now, as opposed to back during Sisterhood Social, or any other possible episode where the Rarity and Sweetie Belle relationship felt a tug? This of course is due to obvious reasons, the fact that this episode probably wasn't made or even written until way after the previous episodes came out, but that's kind of the point. While their relationship has had some rough patches, this choice of a problem has the episode syndrome that we talked about with some point to watch over me. Although I'm sure that a headcanon could be created for why Sweetie Belle kept this from Rarity. We know that this sort of odd inconsistency is inevitable when you're using past events in the same way Polsky is, but our question is, why? Wouldn't it have been remotely better if the backup rationalization for Sweetie Belle's irritation towards Rarity was more recent?
Better yet, Sweetie Belle could have used both Sonic Rainboom and Simple Ways as examples of her anger. While both episodes are vastly apart from each other, within the year time frame, that's all the more convincing for Sweetie Belle's argument since Rarity acts the same way in both episodes. She, both intentionally and unintentionally, tries to steal the spotlight from someone else by being what she isn't or taking advantage of what she was given. Correlate that with Sweetie Belle giving Rarity a chance to make the dresses and you have legitimate anger fodder right there. Nevertheless, the episode rolling with this trauma is understandable, but the conveyance takes a right turn into Awkwardville when Luna taps into Rarity's dreams in order to show her side of the story. Now, we understand that Rarity's side of the story was being used in order to make Sweetie Belle understand, but when this birthday party is literally placed twice within the first few minutes, it feels like wasted time, it's annoying, and it ends up being another nitpick that I really don't like admitting.
The small scene with Rarity stretching over the dresses was well placed at least, since it follows Sweetie Belle's understanding frame of mind. But when Luna knocks Sweetie Belle into a torturous dream due to her consequences, it gets really dark in an interesting way. Sweetie Belle is mentally tortured throughout this entire dark scene, and I feel that Luna's resistance to let Sweetie Belle wake up from her dream until the message is completely sunk into her is a testament to how Luna teaches her lessons. Some people asked if Luna was over-exaggerating this dream, and we think that's the case for a few reasons. One reason is that possibly Luna's lesson teaching is kind of juxtaposed by Celestia's, considering Celestia ambiguously leads you to your answer, while Luna shows you your answer but lets you figure out the meaning behind it. Another possible reason is that Luna went overboard with the over-exaggeration because she took a special interest in Sweetie Belle's problem and wanted to make sure that Sweetie Belle didn't make her mistake.
Another possible reason, although it's a little more in the realm of headcanon, is that this is how Luna teaches lessons, at least in their dreams. The only problem with this theory is that Luna was present in Sleepless in Ponyville during Scootaloo's dreams, and she was a lot more gentle and obvious with her lessons, so it could also just be a writer preference. Either way, the extended nightmare was definitely an interesting choice to knock Sweetie Belle into the right mode. Once Act 3 comes around, the awkwardness again sets in as the CMCs take the train to Canterlot, share a weird discussion about Sapphire's music that only seems to break any possible music stereotype with Scootaloo and Applebloom, if there was any to begin with. Like, Applebloom might listen to country because she's an Earth Pony farmer, etc, etc. Although I laughed at the show tunes bit. Fast forward a little bit and the security guard pony looks awesome along with both Sapphire Shores and her group of dancers.
The chase scene with the box seems a little odd, considering Rarity should have been able to grab the box with her magic since she had line of sight on the box practically the entire chase, but again, we'll roll with it. Sweetie Belle's small conversation with Luna had perfect dialogue in that one part, and it seems like everything is going to be good from here on out. Rarity and Sweetie Belle's final conversation over how important the job is definitely closes the episode well, along with Sapphire Shores' problem being solved, minus the dolphin. Sapphire Shores seems angry, but the dolphin on the headdress fixes everything. One small question we have is why the dolphin needed to be there when the headdress was obviously going to be good enough for Sapphire. Even with this showing and Sapphire's hesitance due to her business instincts, Rarity hasn't disappointed her before, and Sapphire didn't see the headdress, so that thing could have been the second coming of Christ, but because the writer says so, she has to be inconsistently hesitant. Although, it's kind of understandable, considering these outfits were made on commission for a serious, at least we're assuming, show, so just like with Sweetie Belle wanting everything on her plate to be perfect, same goes for Sapphire Shores.
So, yeah, that's the end. See, nearly all the problems I had with this episode, I noticed when I watched it the second time. I thought this episode was practically one of the best that Polsky has ever written, but that's just kind of the fan in me talking. Once I had to watch it with the writer mindset, the flaws became all the more clear. I guess that kind of shows how sucky it is to do analysis sometimes, but at the same time I don't really mind since everything that we said beforehand can basically be previewed with an asterisk saying, "We love this episode even though we had more questions than answers from it." Luna was excellently used in this episode and Sweetie Belle worked for us, albeit we can easily understand if others completely stopped sympathizing with her by the end of Act 1. And if they did, that kind of ruins the episode for them, like how the Breezies in their own episode were reliant on their design to draw in the audience's empathy. For example, if you felt your heartstrings being tugged in that episode, then it worked for the Breezies, but if you wanted to get a fly swatter, not so much.
Well, that's all we got for this episode. Let us know what you think of our more off-the-cuff review, and hopefully this experimental format did what we wanted it to do, which was essentially replace empty narration with more analysis. Thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe if you already haven't, and leave a comment of any possible questions or suggestions for future episode or projects that we should analyze. With that, have a good day and pony on.